Hello, people. This time I'd like to talk about amnesia, dreams, and subliminal art. Since I was young, I used to express myself a lot in art and words, and I noticed a lot in the isolation I found in my house. I was fairly introspective and also still looking for that approval from people who are unapproving. And I look back now at the art that I did back then, and it's been quite an interesting journey too. In that I was really interested in initially eagles and flowers, and I understand now that I was trying to art myself into flying and flowering, and later on it was little houses in mountains with rivers flowing past, which was my interpretation of peace. And when I look back, I understand exactly why I did them. And what did I get into then? Into the poetry. And I'd written a lot of poetry early, which was actually quite exposing in ways, which was taken and published to everybody else without my consent, as my house wasn't my house and my room wasn't my room, and whatever was mine wasn't mine, in some sort of faux display of pride, which resulted in the poetry disappearing, and except for one piece of poetry, which was a bit of shadow poetry where I talked about shooting my parents for affecting my pets, and ironically that one was left out, which was one of those red flags, little pin drops that I talk about, which seem to be irrelevant at the point. A lot of writing over time, but when I was 18 and I'd finally decided that I was going to leave this prodigious boarding school, whatever it was, gulag, I went to a public school locally, and I had to restart my art major work, and I was in a hurry, and it was probably the most authentic thing I could have done. And it was basically a little native boy with the native paint on, with his eyes closed, with all of these authorities around him screaming at him, and he trying to keep the poison amongst it all. And ironically that was destroyed by my brother. And also the picture of the old man early on, wise man, the white-haired man, long beard, long hair. I'll give you a look actually, he's just here, if you can see him. But I've kept what's left of this to remember what was coming through my subconscious through art, and how these were probably the last moments of my organic creation before this type of trauma swallowed my creativity to a large degree. From when I turned from a circle to a square, in conformity, in the loss of the safety of my inner feminine, and in the need to fit in once again, to be able to hide what's been and just carry on, make something else. And the artwork was really important to me, as were the words, and the words kept coming for many years, and I did lose a couple of reams of very important stuff, but what I noticed throughout my writings was the pain and the looping and the fear of the trapdoor. And then I remember when my lovely parents decided to send me to boarding school after my premiere in the Sydney Town Hall, singing solo to a packed audience, which was my gift for success. At that point I was drawing a lot of checkerboard vortexes. They fascinated me at this point, and I didn't know what I was doing, but I was just expressing it, and at that stage it was all squares for me, but they were all bent squares. And in hindsight, I'm now a bit more cognizant to the black and white squares of the chessboard and the vortex of the polarity of black and white, and one's own mentality being sucked down into the void where there is no answer because everything's split perfectly. And this is the path of no path, is to recognize that there is no mistakes, and a lot of the time trauma is the thing that stops one perceiving signals through self-absorption in a frustrated manner. So yeah, learning all this stuff, and also putting it to practice, had me start to question, and also my older brother start to question Freemasonry. And though we were never really open about all of this stuff because he was much smarter than I, and you don't get smarter by people keeping secrets, but telling people you wouldn't understand never really helps if you don't tell them. So once again, this is another part of the bleeding through of the secret of you're 8 years younger than all of us, and you're a reprobate and you're not to understand, sort of thing, even though he'd been punished the same way I had. And watching his art from when I grew up, which was basically suicidal depression, partying with boys, and disappearing into the bush to try to heal. We had a very similar life, and once again I started to understand similarities in that apparently, and it was a bit of a pride story from my mother, that my eldest brother had broken a kid's jaw with a Tonka truck in kindergarten, and now I'm sitting here listening to all this disembodied as this sort of stuff becomes normalised. And by the time my brother was 8, he was shoveled off to boarding school because obviously the parenting was too much, and he needed some abandonment on top of his agonising already, just to further ensue his isolation. And he never really recovered from that, amongst whatever else happened before that. So yeah, he went to boarding school at 8, I went to boarding school at 13. Both of us strangely had 2 circumcisions. and this is another one that I was amnesic about, but Mum has a tendency to uh, want to infect the environment with the truth as fact, as not being any impropriety. So there should be no question about it because it was done by the doctors, you know. And I later looked at this and I thought, that's a bit strange. And also noticing that I'd had a hypoglycemia test early on, 8 to 10 big vials of blood for a hypoglycemia test, and it didn't feel right. And I found my mother coming home with my father not long after a party, and she was vomiting hard, to the point where I actually came up to the bedroom and said, "Dad, what have you done to her?" And Mum tried to assure me, saying it was their friend, the judge's local cocktail. And my strong belief is that there was a good chance that she'd been drinking my blood that night. It gets deep. When I was sent to boarding school after my singing situation, which was almost a breakthrough, which started to make me fear breaking through because I started to fear hope itself. When I got to boarding school, I was told by the housemaster that I was to be broken, and I didn't know where that came from. Where would that come from? And was subjugated to a fair bit of violence in there, and I can't exactly remember what went on in there, but I do know that there was collusion between my parents and the school, to the point where I was walking out of the boarding school with my doona around my shoulders at night and waking up as I got to the door going, once again, if I leave, I'm in trouble. So these are the patterns that ensue with amnesia. Can't escape. If I escape, I'm done. If I don't escape, it's a long haul. So eventually I spoke to my parents about the treatment I was receiving in there, and ironically there was a meeting between the headmaster, the housemaster, and my father, which ended in me being left in that boarding house and me being reefed out of bed at 10:30 at night by the housemaster and the headmaster, and basically given no option but to rescind my accusations. And upon wanting to at least change houses in the 7 kilometres from home so I could be away from this sociopath who was obviously enlisted in this fraternity of black and white squares, that was negated, and I was left in there with him, and things didn't get any better in between. I was crippled one time by a man 6 years older than me. Lots of things happened that rich people pay a lot of money for to house their children, and there's no real concept of real cost of said benefit of private school life. Interesting that a couple of years later I was in that same housemaster's. I'd got out of boarding school finally, and must have been on good behaviour. and it felt like that really. And I was in this housemaster's science class, and I topped the class in chemistry after he told me repeatedly to come and sit in front of him, and I basically said, no, I'm doing all right here. I don't see why I should need to come up and involve myself in your filth, which probably wasn't taken too well. And upon having to admit that I'd topped his class in chemistry, he basically said still didn't understand the basic concepts, which to me shows that he's a moron and a hypocrite, and he has a lot of investment in ego at least, or he's very happy to openly slather someone due to some sort of pre-planned agreement between parent and facility that success will not be tolerated in this situation. So yeah, I became a little afraid of poking my head up, and education was just another 6 years of torture for me, as I couldn't really think to start with. The information meant nothing to me because it was irrelevant and I could poke holes through often, and there was no real authentic response to any questioning other than that which would be attributed to being the right answer, which to me is being made into a fucking parrot, a dickhead. And I'd already remembered enough. I was ready to branch into new stuff. I wasn't really concerned with being told what to think and how to think as well, because I'd already been through that. Another point of my amnesia at that point was having left school. I was completely disoriented. I'd realised that I had a great separation from women, love, the ability to be intimate on a functional level. And my father came up with a proposal for me to go to a broadacre cropping station out in the middle of bumfuck to prove myself. And he made me sign a contract, and here we go with the contracts, here we go with the legalities. My father was a high-powered lawyer, and what I'll say now is maritime and common law is no different to spiritual law. You sign something, you're up for it. And it doesn't matter whether you just nod and agree, or shake a hand, or sign a paper. But he went the full distance and made me sign a paper through one of his other Freemason mates who'd been fucking my mother. And I went out to that place, and that was very interesting, and not my people at all, and not what I wanted to do, but apparently I had to still prove myself as a person, as a viable human being to this sycophant. And these people eventually got me out there and sprayed me with cotton defoliant through a crop duster and laughed at me. And I'm looking again going, is this all connected? What is this about? So anyway, I went and dobbed him into because I'm a good dobber. I've never stood back. Went and told the manager, and he got very pensive and quiet. And so I relegated myself to ending that contract and coming back to my brother's in the hope that I could recover from my father's full knowledge that this had happened, and his absolute negation of the experience. And that alone in court would have had me set for life. So the more that I found this stuff, the more amnesic I became, really, but the more I was dropping pins as to what was really starting to emerge in the environment. And I've found a hell of a lot since. And these people don't expect people to talk about this sort of stuff because they hope that the fear of death is greater than your want to liberate. And they are cowards. And they put the fear of death in me to the point where I didn't fear death anymore. Sort of cured me. Because when you've seen malevolence in humanity to a point where you have to re-embody, then you have to understand that if they couldn't kill you then, they're not going to kill you now. They won't do it. And even as I speak, they're rattling. Because this is exactly what they trauma trained me not to do. And they trauma trained me not to find love. Because love would be the thing that would assist me in unfolding. And the shame of this experience has held me in a place where attraction is a threat to me, because I'm not sure if I'll be accepted through what I've been through. And it's a big thing to hide. So speaking about all of this is it's about undoing what should never have been done. It's about not being afraid of consequences when essentially you're innocent, even though you've walked around with the shame and the guilt of the oppressors. And to understand that the silence is the way they take power from you, in understanding that they've basically bridled you into submission and into a lesser life by a want to subjugate spirit and steal energy, basically, by whatever means. Once again, sexual, spiritual, emotional, physical, it doesn't matter, monetary. Children will be used as pawns, as the breeding program for these people is only for utilisation. It's got nothing to do with connection or love. Though it will give that appearance. And it's not until many years later that you see the effects on the children, by which time often they've cut off the very support they needed to get through it. And this is the world of inversion, and this is a lot of what we've seen over this time, where as I've said, appearance is more important than reality. And we're coming to a point of AI, which is, narcissism's basically a form of AI. Artificial intelligence is demonic. It really is. Narcissism is a form of artificial intelligence because it supposes to be. And if we want to get biblical about it, devil comes in whispers, and it's only discernment that has you understand what's right and what's not, dependent on your level of outer support and your level of acuity. You're dependent on the level of your inner support system and the level of damage in the security system when it comes to confrontation. And spiritual confrontation is insidious. They'll slip up here and there, but by the time they've slipped up, a lot of times on a minor level, the big one becomes more minor. And This is the frog boiling technique. So yeah, the art's been handy. I never knew why I kept doing it, and I don't have the imagination to do it now, and I have a great resistance to it now, like I do to the expression of attraction and love. And I own that while I understand the way women communicate, for me personally, having been gaslit all my life by women that I didn't choose and then women that I did, I have a real issue with indirect communication. And because supposition has been a lot of what narcissism has taught me is incorrect. And I also know that predation has been a big part of what's prevented women from being direct. So I align and I understand about objectification and predation in that regard, and in a lot of ways I reflect that in society as a man who's been treated like a woman, who was taken for their wares as a product and not a soul, not a human being trying to evolve. And to me, still beyond all of this, and I understand, you know, I understand this in me because I don't expect much from men, but I do expect a lot more from women because they're the suppleness, they're the connection to the universe, and they're the source of creativity, and I was taught the antithesis of that. So when I see it, I'm in total confusion. I don't understand inside me, because the first one I had to reach out to was the first one I wanted to push away. And then, as I said, I subliminally choose that same one again to remind myself of the original sin, which wasn't mine. But it is one of society's, because women have been oppressed for no reason. Well, there's been no argument about it. And women are the portals of our children. And women are the last bastion of security for the children, especially when the man's not right. And if that woman can't stand up, she's an enabler. And that means that the same breast that suckled the young is the one that will allow perpetration. And I'm really happy to say, here's another quick one before I go. When you listen to these people, they give things away. And it wasn't until I was about 48 that my brother slipped out that I wouldn't drink my mother's milk from birth, because I already knew she was toxic. And it only last year it took me to say to her, I now understand why you smell the way you do. You have an odour that I also became amnesiac about because I couldn't get away from it. And the odour is somewhere between sulphur and rotting flesh. And that's for real. Interesting what you find out about these ones. Yeah, a little bit of the demonic about them. On that note, I'll leave. Blessings.